Okay, in this video, permit me to talk about powering fractions. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of how to power a fraction. Say we have 4/5. Oops. All right, and we want to power that fraction. All right, say we want to power it by 2. Well, when you're powering a fraction, you're going to power both the numerator and the denominator. So that turns into 4 to the power of 2 divided by 5 to the power of 2. And then when you change those, you're going to do 16 divided by 25. And then you're done. And that's how you power a fraction. All right, let's take a look at another example. Say you had, 2/3. All right, you're going to power that to the power of 3. Okay. Well, that's going to be 2 to the 3rd power divided by 3 to the 3rd power. And then that's going to equal 8 divided by 27. Okay. And that's just another example of how you power a fraction. Okay. In this case, we're squaring it and we're cubing it. All right, now let's take a look at square rooting fractions. Okay, so let's take a fraction such as 16 over 25. Okay, so you have 16 over 25. And when we square root this fraction, we're going to square root the entire fraction, like so. All right? Let's make that 6 a little bit better. Okay. Well, when we square root it, just like when we power it, we're going to square root both the numerator and the denominator. So that could be rewritten as the square root of 16 divided by the square root of 25. Oops. And what's the square root of 16? Well, that's 4. So that equals 4. And the square root of 25 is 5. So that's how you do that. Let's take a look at another example. And let's say we have 81 over 144. All right, so you need to square root that whole thing. Well, you're just going to square root the numerator and the denominator both. And when you do that, it's going to be the square root of 81 divided by the square root of 144. All right, and then the square root of 81 equals 9, and the square root of 144 equals 12. Now, we could say that we're done, but we're not quite done because we can reduce this, and we can reduce this down to a smaller term. All right, and the lowest term here, in order to do that, we need to divide both the 9 and the 12 by the greatest common factor, or the largest common multiple. And what's the largest common multiple? Well, they share 3. 3 goes into 9 and 3 goes into 12. And so 3, we're going to divide that. Divide this by 3. Divide this by 3. And that equals 9 divided by 3 is 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So that's the answer. So the square root of 81 divided by 144 is 3/4. Okay? Now, the question at hand is, what if you have what if you have a fraction that's just a little bit more complicated? It doesn't necessarily look like something that you can square. So for example, say you had something like 45 divided by 80. You know, actually, before I show that to you, some of you might be confused. Let's take a look at that same example I just did before, 81 divided by 144. Well, let's look at a different way of doing that, okay? So, again, we had 81 divided by 144, okay? And we wanted to square root this. But before we square root it, we don't have to square root it yet. We could reduce it first. We could reduce it and then square root it if at all possible, and it is possible. Okay, so what is the greatest common factor or the largest common multiple of 81 and 144? Well, that would be 9. So we could divide both the top and bottom by 9. Okay, so now it's 9. Oops, let's use a different color. It's 9 divided by 16. And we're still square rooting that. So now it's the square root of 9 divided by the square root of 16. All right, and that equals 3 over 4, which we got. That's what we got the last time we did this. We got 3 divided by 4, or 3/4, or 0.75. That's what this is. Okay, so before what we did is we did the square root of 81 and the square root of 144, and that was the square root of both of those was, if you recall, 9 over 12. All right, and then we reduced that, and we did that by dividing it by 3. All right, and then that equaled 3/4. Okay, so they both equal the same thing. It's just two different ways of doing it. Okay, now let's go back to what I was going to show you before. All right, now remember, you can reduce a fraction inside of, or before you square root it, you can reduce it. Okay, so let's take a look at something like 45. Like I was saying, 45 divided by 80. All right, and then we're going to square root that. Now, can anything squared equal 45? No. And can anything squared equal 80? Well, that's another no. It doesn't work. But we could reduce this, and if we reduce this, then maybe we could square root it. So how could we reduce this? Well, what goes into both of these? Well, 5 goes into both of these. Oops. All right, and what does that equal? Well, this equals 9, and this equals 16. Okay, and we're still square rooting it. So when we square root it, remember, we're going to square root the top and the bottom, and that's going to equal, no, I don't like that. Let me see here. Let's try a different color. There we go. That's going to equal 3 over 4. So even though this doesn't look like something we could technically square root, in the end we could, because we reduced it first, and then after we reduced it, we could square root it. So this doesn't look like something we could square root, but when we change it to a smaller term, all right, in this case 9 over 16, then we can square root the 9 over 16, and that equals 3/4. All right, so that's pretty much it for this video. In the next video, we're going to go over order of operations with fractions.